She knelt in the red sand, her hands cuffed behind her back. The metal chain cut into her skin, and the rising sun felt like a branding iron around her. Other slaves lay in broken groups, their eyes distant and tired. The air was dry and hot, with dust swirling at their feet. No walls held them in, the chains were their prison. Each link of iron spoke of lost freedom. Every day, she felt the weight of the past settle on her shoulders, heavier than the collar. At her throat, long ago, she had walked free under tall trees and soft skies. She had laughed with friends, and her heart had felt light. Those memories seemed far away, like images from another life. The guards wore dark masks and carried batons. They passed by without a word, or sometimes they kicked at her when they felt bored. Fear curled in her chest with each harsh step. She learned to lower her gaze and hold her breath. But behind closed eyes, she saw her family's faces and heard their voices calling her name. Each night, whispers drifted through the camp. Some spoke of escape tunnels under old walls. Others told of rebels waiting to help. She listened in the dark, her heart pounding. She dared to hope that freedom might come one day. She imagined tasting fresh fruit, feeling soft grass under her feet, and speaking her true name without fear. This small dream became a candle in her mind. It flickered, but it did not die. She held it close and repeated it to herself when pain or hunger made her weak. She clung to the thought of kindness as though it were a shield. Morning light brought pain and hunger again. She felt every ache in her bones from the hard ground. But even this pain reminded her that she was alive. There was power in life, like a quiet strength hidden beneath her ribs. She looked around at her fellow prisoners. Some had lost hope and stared at the sky with empty eyes. Others comforted each other with prayers and low voices. She reached out and touched a woman's hand. The woman squeezed back, and for a moment, they shared the same small gift, the feeling of being seen. In the distance, a low horn sounded, and the guards stirred. Chains rattled as they prepared to move the slaves to the market. She felt her heart drum in her chest like a warning bell. She closed her eyes and felt the cold metal against her wrists. Every step felt like a long road, too. An unknown fate, fear and hope tangled inside her. She tried to steady her breath. Even as the terror rose, the candle of her dream burned bright. She promised herself that she would not let the chains break her spirit. She rose to her feet when the guards shouted orders. The chains bit into her skin, but she held her head high. Behind her, the dusty pens fell away like a faded memory. She stepped toward the market platform, each iron link echoing on the hard ground. In her mind, she whispered her true name. She spoke it softly, letting it rise on the wind. For a moment, she felt free inside, warmed by the thought of life without chains. In that long moment, she found a new strength. Though the chains still weighed her down, her spirit felt light as air. She saw the sun rise higher and knew that change could come. Within her chest, the small spark of hope burned brighter than ever. It guided her steps onto the busy platform where she would meet the human who saw her not as property, but as a person. And in that instant, she understood that her story was no longer written by chains, but by the promise of freedom ahead. She stood on the dusty platform, her chains rattling as the guards pushed her forward. The market was loud. Voices rose and fell like waves. Buyers in fine clothes whispered and pointed. The air smelled of sweat and spice. Bright banners flapped in the wind. Her heart pounded with fear. She had never seen such a crowd before. Every face felt cold. They dragged her steps forward until she reached the edge of the platform. There she met the gaze of the auctioneer. He wore a bright coat and tall hat. He raised a gavel and called for silence. She stared at him in fear. Behind him, a tall figure moved through the crowd. He looked at her with calm eyes. In that moment, her pulse slowed. She felt something new stir inside. The tall figure stepped forward, and the guards cleared a path. He moved with purpose, not like a buyer, but like a friend. She saw kindness in his eyes. His coat was plain, and his boots were worn. No one else noticed him. Of hope, the auctioneer raised his gavel again, began to name a price. Voices rose as buyers bid and fought for a bargain. The value of a life felt small here. She looked at the human. His lips were pressed tight, but he did not raise his hand. He watched her as though he studied a rare flower. Her breath caught at his gaze. Fear and wonder tangled in her chest. She sniffed the dry air. The sound of coins thumping on wood echoed. She had been silent for years. Now she wanted to speak, to tell him her name, to ask why he looked at her with such softness. But her voice was lost. She could only stare, waiting for the next move. The highest bid rang out. A harsh voice declared the sale. Chains rattled again as the guards unlocked her left hand. She took a small step forward. Her heart thundered. The human raised his hand then. He offered his few coins. The auctioneer hesitated. This was not a usual bid. Then he nodded and banged the gavel once. Silence fell. A guard stepped forward and snapped the lock. The heavy chain fell away with a clatter. She rubbed her wrist and felt a pool of fresh air where metal had pressed. For the first time in years, she felt something that felt like relief. The human reached out his hand. It was steady and warm. She looked at it as if it were a lifeline. She hesitated for a breath. Fear still bit her mind. But the warmth touched her palm and spread like sunshine. She placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers. No chain bound her now. She felt tears rise, but she blinked them back. He gave a quiet nod. In his eyes, she read the promise of safety. As they left the platform, the crowd fell silent. Others stared in surprise. No one had ever seen a bidder act so gently. She walked beside him, her steps slow and careful. He matched her pace. She felt his calm in each breath. The guard still held her other hand, but they relaxed. Her head lifted, and she dared to look around. They moved through dusty streets, toward a small house at the edge of the town. She felt light, as though she could fly. The weight of chains was gone, but the memory of them made her heart ache. She kept his hand in hers. Each step felt like a step toward a new life. In her heart, the glimmer of hope grew bright. His final words reached her ears. She was free. She felt tears of joy. World felt new. She nodded to him and stepped forward. Old fear melted away. In her heart, hope burned like a star. Asked ChatGPT. Coins struck the wooden table as the auctioneer's gavel fell. Buyers cheered at the highest offer. Then a hush spread across the dusty platform when the human stepped forward with his bid. His coins were brighter than the others, and he laid them down without a word. The auctioneer raised an eyebrow, but called his name. She felt her heart tighten. No one had ever paid so much for her life. A sharp thrill of fear ran through her chest. She did not know why he chose her, yet in that moment she dared to hope that this sale meant more than cruelty. As the guards unlocked her shackles, she felt metal drop away. Cold air brushed her skin, and she gasped. The heavy collar came loose next, and she bent her head to rub the sore track marks on her neck. She blinked against the glare of the sun. Her body trembled from long hours of pain. The guards stepped back, uncertain. They did not know how to treat someone so suddenly without chains. She pressed her palms together, feeling raw flesh where iron had cut. Fear and relief warred inside her. She closed her eyes and took the first free breath she had known in years. The human moved at her side. He offered her a small water skin. Its leather surface felt soft under her fingertips. She brought it to her lips and drank. Cool water slid down her throat, washing away dust and dryness. He waited patiently, his calm presence beside her. When she finished, he held out a clean cloth. It smelled of lavender. She wiped her face and hands, taking in the scent with wonder. The simplest gift felt like a promise. She glanced at him, meeting his eyes for a moment. Kindness shone there, and she felt a flicker of trust. He spoke her name in a quiet voice. The words sounded strange on his lips, but gentle. She realized she had not heard her name spoken since she was taken. She answered in her own language, voice shaking, repeated it back with care. A small smile tugged at her lips. In that moment, she felt seen. The buyers and guards faded away. All that existed was this human who called her by name. She fought back tears but blinked them away. She could not cry here. Not yet. Instead, her heart swelled with emotion. He gestured toward a covered wagon parked nearby. Inside, she saw blankets and simple food. He lifted her hand gently and guided her inside. As they walked, she noticed the crowd parting. Some watched in silence. Others stared in envy. She felt proud and small all at once. The wagon's wooden wheels creaked as they moved. Dust rose around them. She held onto the edge and looked back at the platform where she once knelt. Now she rode free. Her mind raced with questions. Who was this man? Why did he care? But she could only breathe and follow. Inside the wagon, the human offered her bread and fruit. She took a piece and bit into it. Sweet juice burst in her mouth and she closed her eyes in delight. He watched with a gentle expression. They ate in silence, but in that quiet, a new bond formed. He unrolled a blanket and patted a spot beside him. She hesitated, then sat down. The fabric was soft and clean. She rested her head against the wood and felt warmth in her chest. For the first time, she believed that her life could change. Hope felt real, like a living thing she carried inside. As the wagon rolled toward his home, she gazed at the distant hills. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in gold. A mix of fear for the unknown and excitement for what might come. The chains were gone, but she knew her journey had just begun. She looked at him and whispered thanks, her voice barely above a breath. He nodded and smiled. In his eyes she saw a promise. She would not be alone. And in her heart, the spark of freedom grew brighter, guiding her toward a future she once thought impossible. Ask ChatGPT. She stepped down from the wagon and felt soft grass under her feet for the first time in years. The human led her along a narrow path toward a small house with white stone walls. Vines crept up around the windows and smoke curled from the chimney. A gentle breeze carried the scent of flowers. She pressed her palms against the rough wood of the door and let out a slow breath. Here, the air tasted like freedom. Inside, the room glowed with golden light from a crackling fire. A wooden table held bowls of steaming soup and fresh bread. He offered her a bowl and smiled. She lifted it to her lips and sipped. Warm broth slid down her throat and soothed the ache in her chest. Each bite of bread felt like a blessing. He watched patiently as she ate, never rushing her. In that quiet kindness, she felt her guard soften. After the meal, he guided her to a small washroom. Water filled a clay tub and steam rose. He handed her a cloth and nodded. Hesitant, she dipped the cloth into the warm water and touched her arms. The cloth slid over old scars and fresh bruises. She closed her eyes and let the water carry away months of pain. He turned away respectfully. When she finished, she dressed in a soft shift made of linen. The cloth brushed her skin without scratching. She looked at herself in a simple mirror and hardly recognized the reflection. He showed her to a bedroom with a low bed, piled with cushions. She sank into the mattress and felt warmth spread through her body. Tonight, she would sleep without chains, without guards, and without fear. Outside, owls hooted in the trees and the wind whispered in the eaves. She drew the covers around her and let her mind float. For the first time in memory, she did not dream of running or hiding. She dreamed of sunlight and laughter. The next morning, sunlight passed through the open window and landed on her face. She blinked awake, feeling rested. He stood by the door and held out a wooden mug of tea. She took it with careful fingers and drew in the herbal scent. He pointed to a small garden beyond the porch. Together they walked among rows of herbs and bright flowers. He bent to show her rosemary and lavender, letting her crush a leaf between her fingers so she could smell its oil. She smiled at the simple lesson. He spent the afternoon teaching her his language. He wrote symbols in a notebook and spoke them aloud. She repeated the sounds, stumbling at first, then more clearly. Each new word gave her power. Soon she could say thank you, water, and home. He clapped softly when she succeeded. Her heart swelled with pride. In his patient voice she heard acceptance. In the days that followed, she helped him with chores around the house. She carried buckets of water and swept floors. He showed her how to feed chickens and gather eggs. When she stood before the hens, their soft feathers reminded her of warmth. She laughed when one pecked at her hand, and he laughed too. The sound felt like music rising in her chest. One evening, he brought her back to the market square, not chained but by her own free will. He introduced her to townsfolk who greeted her with kind smiles. They offered small gifts of bread and fresh fruit. She bowed her head in thanks, her cheeks warm. The people did not see a slave. They saw a new neighbor. She stood beside the human who saved her, and felt her spirit lift like a bird taking flight. Each sunrise brought new tasks and new lessons. With every gentle word and guiding hand, she learned that life could be more than survival. It could be color and sound and laughter. Freedom was not just the absence of chains, but the presence of hope, and in her new life, that hope grew stronger every day. Ask ChatGPT. She and the human sat by the fire each evening. The flames danced in their eyes as she told him stories from her homeland. She spoke slowly, finding words in his tongue one by one. He listened with gentle attention, never interrupting. Paused, he asked kindly for more. In that calm light, her heart felt safe. The fear inside her chest softened with each shared moment. She learned that kindness could heal wounds deeper than any medicine. He, in turn, spoke of his own past. He told her about his family's farm, the long days of work in golden fields, and the laughter of children chasing chickens through the yard. His voice was steady and warm, and she saw a life full of simple joys. He did not pity her. Instead, he treated her as an equal friend, worthy of respect. In his stories, she caught glimpses of a world where she could belong. Sometimes their words stumbled over each other. She mixed up his words and made him laugh. He imitated her accent and made her giggle in return. They both learned from these mistakes. With each gentle correction, her voice grew stronger. He praised her efforts, making her chest lift with pride. The awkward moments became bridges between two people from different worlds. In those light-hearted exchanges, she felt the first true warmth of friendship. During the day, she helped him in the garden. She knelt beside him in soil rich with life and tended rows of green shoots. He showed her how to plant seeds in neat lines and taught her to recognize young sprouts. Her hands, once calloused from chains, now felt the cool earth with wonder. Once he worked beside her, offering water when she paused to rest. Together they watched the tiny plants reach toward sun, and she understood that growth came slowly but surely. In turn, she showed him small traditions from her culture. She braided flowers into his simple hair and taught him a soft song from her old village. He listened carefully and tried to sing back. The tune was unfamiliar, but he smiled at every attempt. When he finally matched a few notes, she clapped joyfully and pressed her hand to her heart. He bowed in playful respect. In that moment, she saw that he valued her heritage and that her past was part of their shared present. One afternoon, a sudden storm rolled in. Fierce winds rattled the windows and sent rain pounding on the roof. She froze, remembering nights chained in cold pens. He saw her tremble and took her hand. He led her to a sturdy corner of the house and held her close as thunder shook the walls. His calm voice whispered that she was safe. In his arms, she felt the promise of protection. Her tears came without shame. He wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and let her cry until the storm passed. When the sky cleared, they stepped outside to see a rainbow arch across the fields. She pointed to the colors, and he named each one in his tongue. They stood together. In quiet wonder, she leaned her head on his shoulder and smiled. In that shared silence, she felt their bond deepen beyond words. She knew then that trust was not fragile like glass, but strong like iron, hard to break once it formed. That night, she wrote down the human's words in a small book he gave her. He wrote her name at the top of a blank page and underlined it. Twice, she traced the letters with her finger. Each letter felt like a step toward a new life. As she closed the book, she realized that she no longer saw herself as property. She was a friend, a helper, and someone who could give just as much love as she received. In her heart, the ember of hope blazed into a steady flame. The morning light felt heavy when a fierce storm rolled over the settlement. Thunder boomed like the beating of giant drums, and rain hammered the tin roofs. Wind tore at clotheslines and rattled windows. The narrow streets filled with water, and puddles formed at doorways. Then the lights blinked and died. The old generator at the edge of town had failed. Without power, pumps stopped, and clean water grew scarce. In the dark, people gathered lanterns and candles, their faces set with worry. Mothers clutched children. Workers dropped tools. She watched him from a distance, her heart stirring with something new, a need to help. He knelt beside the silent machine, lifting tools from a small box. He tried to turn its gears, but they were stiff and rusted. He frowned in frustration. She knew machines. She had once repaired a water pump in her village under a harsh sun. She remembered how she twisted bolts and cleared rust with worn tools. Pain in her hands had become a guide, not a curse. Now she saw his need and felt confidence rise in her chest. She stepped forward across the muddy ground. The rain fell in her hair, but she did not stop. He looked up when she reached the generator. His eyes widened in surprise. No one had ever offered to help him before. He stood and wiped rain from his brow. She bowed her head in respect and spoke in his tongue. "Let me try." Voice was steady, hesitated, but trust in his eyes gave her strength. He handed her a wrench and pointed to a broken belt. She nodded and knelt beside him. Cold metal bit into her knees, but she barely felt it. Every link in her chain memory told her she could do this. She worked quickly, using rough hands like tools shaped by years of hardship, loosened bolts with careful turns. Her fingers found the broken belt and lifted it away. It cleaned cogs of mud and oil. He watched, amazed, as she fit a spare belt from his supply and tightened it just so. She adjusted a lever that had jammed under rain and snapped the switch back on. Lightning flashed, and she braced herself. Then the engine sputtered and coughed to life. A hum filled the air. Lights flickered across the town like a wave of sunrise. Water pumps gurgled, pipes hissed with life. People cheered in the streets. Mothers held their children close. Workers raised their tools and shouted her name. The human stood beside her, his face bright with pride. He put a hand on her shoulder and squeezed gently. Her heart thundered with joy. Chains had once bound her body. Now gratitude bound her soul. In that moment, she felt a place to stand in the world. As the storm passed and the sun peeked through gray clouds, they walked back to his home side by side. Wet grass brushed their ankles, and birds began to call. He offered her a dry cloth to wipe her face. She laughed when she saw the streaks of mud and oil on her cheeks. He laughed too, a sound that felt like music. That night by the fire, she told him of her past skills and how they helped her survive. He listened with wonder and respect. She realized then that proving herself was not just about machines. It was about trust, respect, and the strength to face storms together. In her chest, hope burned brighter than ever, guiding her toward a future she had won with her own hands. After she drifted to sleep, she dreamt of iron chains falling away and of the stars shining through open windows. She woke before dawn, her heart full of promise. She realized that her hands, once made for toil and pain, had built hope and light for many. She whispered her own name with pride. The morning sun rose over the settlement, golden light spilling across the square. Word had spread that she would speak today. Former slaves gathered in small groups, their chains traded for simple clothes. Some faces showed hope, others still hid fear. But when she stepped into view, a hush fell like soft snow. She stood beside the human who saved her, his calm presence a steady anchor. He offered her a gentle nod. In that moment, she felt the weight of every chain she had worn, how she had found strength beyond metal. Behind her, a simple wooden podium rose above the crowd. Leaders from nearby towns and villages waited under colorful banners. Breeze carried the scent of fresh bread from market stalls. Children perched on their parents' shoulders. The square pulsed with quiet energy. She ran her fingers along the edge of the podium, feeling its rough grain. Her heart beat fast, but her mind held one clear thought: to speak for those who still could not speak. She drew a deep breath and remembered her true name. She stepped forward. The human placed a hand on her shoulder and gave a small smile. She looked out at the faces before her, eyes bright with curiosity. Mothers clutching children. Workers, with dirt on their hands, soldiers in neat uniforms. Even the guards who once stood watch now stood at ease. Her chest swelled with emotion. She raised her chin and let the quiet settle. Then she began. "Friends," she said, her voice soft at first. Then it grew in strength. "I once knelt in chains under a burning sun. I learned to hide my name and hold my breath. I learned to live without hope. But today I stand free, because one human showed me kindness." She paused. A gentle wind lifted her hair. Kindness can break chains stronger than iron. Kindness can light paths made dark by fear. Her words spread like ripples across a still pond. She spoke of her people, those left behind, and those freed today. She told how they dreamed of fresh water and simple homes. She spoke of children who needed safe hands. She called on the leaders to end the slave trade. "Let no soul be bought or sold," she said. "Let freedom be our gift to every heart." Her voice rang clear. Tears shone in her eyes, but she held them back. She thought of cold nights in the pens and of the warmth found in a shared meal. As she spoke, the human stood beside her, silent and proud. She named him, calling him friend and brother. He stepped forward and bowed his head. The crowd broke into applause. Hands pounded on wooden crates and benches. Cheers rose like birds in flight. She felt the energy lift. Her spirit, she felt the bonds of the past fall away under the sound of hope. Leaders approached at the end. They promised to close the market pens. They vowed to set free every slave left in the region. Tears glistened on her cheeks as she shook hands with each one. The human wrapped a gentle arm around her waist. Stood together while the crowd chanted, "Freedom, freedom." Children waved ribbons of color. Grown men wiped eyes. In that moment, she saw how true strength lay not in weapons or fear, but in unity and care. When the sun dipped low, lanterns lit the square in soft light. Music rose as villagers brought bread and wine. She smiled as she danced with the children. The human joined in, spinning her under the lights. Laughter echoed between old stone walls. She felt joy press against her ribs like a new heartbeat. That night, she lay in a soft bed, the human's hand warm against hers. She closed her eyes and felt peace. Chains could bind a body, but they could never bind a spirit. She thought of every step she had taken from dust and chains to this night of celebration. She whispered her true name once more and let it fill her with promise. Tomorrow would bring new work and new challenges, but together they would face them with kindness and courage. She would always stand as freedom's champion, asked ChatGPT.